Day 4 is the day of the heart. Yeah, it's working. All right. Okay, here we go. The day of the heart. Finally, we made it. It's day 4. And I really like how straight and all these rows are perfect, but we got to move all the chairs. In a minute, in just a second. We're going to begin with a dance. It's called a Sufi dance, and it's about a 700-year-old dance. But it's not really a dance, it's a meditation. I mean, you're dancing, you're moving, but it's a moving meditation is what it is. And the Sufis did this every single morning in their khankas. A khanka is like a monastery or an ashram. And every morning they would do this because it was the essence of what they were trying to learn. And by doing it every morning, it changes you. It is a very powerful thing. And so in a moment we'll do that, and that takes a while. It takes by the time you get started and done, finished, it takes almost an hour. After that, we will begin. But let's just do this. Let's just start here because it is the reason I do this is that it is so powerful putting you in your heart. And a lot of people end up crying a lot. Can't help it, especially if you're a crier. If you are a crier, just fill your pockets with Kleenex because you know it's going to happen. And they will pass them around, and it's okay. So I don't know if we can get 127 people in a circle. I'm going to try it, and if it doesn't work, then I'm going to have to go to 2 circles. But first we'll try that and see how it works. So, you can just take the chairs and put them up here, I think. Just stack them. Start stacking them. Use all the space you can. Yeah, just see that there's about 6 feet all the way around. That's all we need. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. This is faster if I just do it because I've tried it before, and if you guys do it, it takes twice as long. I'm going to just say you're number 1, you're number 2, and number 2 come into the inner circle and face them that way. So you're 1 and you're 2, and you're 1 and you're 2, and 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Okay, we are even again. We're a very even group. Okay, now try to space yourselves so that you have room. I mean, it goes left or right. Does everybody have a partner? Say yes. Okay. All right. I know you guys like each other, but I need your attention up here. Okay. Now, here's the way it's going to work. Is Diane here? No, yeah, come here so I can show everybody. And I hope everybody can see. Okay, this is how it begins. You're going to be with one person here, and then you're going to hear these and you're going to be hugging this person. This is the very end. We're going from the end to the beginning. And you're hugging this person, and you're going to hear these bells go ding. And it then means that you have to break your hug, which is really hard because you'll understand a little bit. I mean, you get so close to these people that it's hard. So anyway, you have to break the hug, you bow to them, and you take a step to the left. And now you have a brand new person, okay? When you meet that person, you bow to them. You honor the divine light within them. And then you give them your right hand and let them place it over their heart chakra. And then you begin to look into their eyes. I can't talk if I'm looking into your eyes.
Let's do it this way because there's others.
Okay, so you bow, you give them your right hand and let them place it over their heart chakra. And then you begin to look into their eyes, and it's really the same thing that you did on the first day, where you look into the person's eyes and you look past their personality and you look for that sacred being that is within them. Only now you're going to be looking through many people, and it does something entirely different. It's amazing what happens in this. And so you have 60 seconds. I'm actually timing it with a little clock, so you don't have to think about that. And in those 60 seconds, you just find that sacred place within them. And it's what's so interesting is that you'll realize that as you go from person to person, it's always the same. It's not a different energy. It's the same exact energy, and in everyone it's a sacred place. And so at the end of 60 seconds, you're going to sing them a song. And the words of the song are, "You are my beloved, I open my heart to you." But you're not opening to the ego or to the personality. You're opening your heart to that sacred being within them. Okay? It's really different than it's not just a person. You're really going straight to the source. And so you sing them a song, "You are my beloved, I open my heart to you." And it goes like this. You are my beloved, I open my heart to you. And you're holding, you have their hand on your heart and your hand on their heart. And so what you do is when you open your heart, you feel your love go down your arm and into their heart. And you feel their love come back from them to you. And you feel this connection. We hold that for 20 seconds. Who cares? You're just doing it for a little bit, and you feel that connection. And then after another 20 seconds, it's a very simple thing, and then hug that person. They'll just say hug, and you just give them a hug, and that's also for 20 seconds. And then after that, you'll hear the bells, and you have to break the hug. It's really hard to break this hug sometimes, because you've just connected with a sacred being, and you can feel it. Where's the Kleenex? Diane will distribute this. You can have 1 or 2 boxes. If you know you're going to cry, just go ahead and do it. If you think you even might want to cry, do it. When you need it, you need it. Now this is important. This was traditionally always done in absolute silence. It's a meditation. It's actually in the physical heart. It's inside the physical heart. The chakra is connected directly to it. There's a direct relationship between the heart chakra and the tiny space in the heart, but it is not exactly the same. We got to sing the song, so you know it. So I'll sing it one more time, and then you come after that. You are my beloved, I open my heart to you. Okay, let's all do it. You are my beloved, I open my heart to you. You just sing it one time, that's all. And then you actually feel the love go down and you feel it come back. And I'll lead you all the way through. I'll lead you through it for at least 2 or 3 times, and then after that you'll get it. You'll know what to do. Okay, now turn it around. Here we go. Go ahead and start the music. Okay, close your eyes first and remember your Merkaba and the flow of energy coming into your heart chakra. Remember the angel from the first day. Feel her or him. Feel that angel within you and all around you. Okay, open your eyes. Bow to your partner, honoring the divine light within them. And hand them your right hand. And let them place it over your heart. And now look into their eyes and find that sacred and holy place within them. And the song, you are my beloved, I open my heart to you. I'm sorry, but you have to break the hug. You have to move. The song, you are my beloved, I open my heart to This is the day of the heart, and we're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to eventually, though all of this is going to lead into a meditation toward the end of the day, where we actually go into the sacred space of our heart. Can I see how many people feel that they know how and they've been into their sacred space of their heart? It's approximately 51 out of 127. So it's got a lot of work. We probably will get most people before the end of the day. And there'll be a few of you that still won't be able to get in. I don't want to program that, but there'll probably be a few. And it's okay. A lot of times when you get home and you're in the safety of your own place and you can repeat what's done, then you find you can do it. And but there is a thing, which is the emotional trauma. And I'll just talk about that just for a second. If you can't get in, very often, most often, it's because you've had an emotional trauma centered around love that was so deep that when you begin to move back into the heart, it either hurts or it feels cold or it's something that makes you back away. And what I've discovered is if you're brave enough and if you can go through it, you're fine once you get in there. Everything's okay. But if you can't, then and you keep trying and you still have that same feeling, the only thing that you can do is to go through therapy and find out what that was and to release that pain. Then it's easy. But there is another thing, and which is not having to do with trauma at all, but having to do with there is a specific vibration that must be within you. We'll talk about this later. It has to do with the way that you connect with the outer reality. And you have to do this in a certain kind of way, and if you don't, you're wasting your time. But we will clearly explain what it is, what you have to do to get that vibration within you. But so often people hear it, they do it here, and then they go home and they didn't think it was important and they just forget it. But when I get to that point, I'll be very clear on that, because it is another one of the reasons why if you don't follow one of the instructions, there's nothing you can do. It doesn't matter what you do, you can't get in. But we'll work with that when we get to there. But there is a in your physical heart, there is a tiny little place. It's so small that I don't know if you could actually see it. It's so little. And science has been trying to find it, especially heart math at Stanford has been spending years working on this. They know the vibration. They actually have an instrument that you can buy. You can push your finger on the button, and if you're in your heart, it'll say so, and if you're not, it gives you a red light or a green light. And it tells you if you're in or not. It's a very specific frequency. It's actually more than a frequency, it's a waveform. And it's a very beautiful waveform when you see it on a screen. And that is science is slowly getting there. They've never been able to figure out, and they know it's true, they've never been able to figure out how it's related to the pineal gland. And I don't know where that stuff, this is it here? Might as well put this over here. there's a relationship between this and the heart, and they know that for sure because of their experiments, but they have never been able to figure out, at least I haven't talked to them for 2 or 3 years, so I don't know for sure, but they've never been able to figure out what it is, and they've checked every single possible electrical connection within the body, and they can't find it. The reason, I believe, is because it's not in the body. It's external to the body. And we'll explain that too once we understand what we're having to say. There's a lot of information around the heart that is kind of important to know. You don't have to know it to do this, especially if you're entering the heart from a female way. If you do it from a female way, you just do it. You just do it. But if you're doing it from a male way, you've got to know the doorway, and you've got to know exactly how to get in there. It's male, right? You have to know the instructions. So we will talk to the male way, but there is the female way. I would love to have my wife come here today. I don't know if she will or not. I never know about her. She is her own woman. But she doesn't use any of the stuff that I do. It's all imagery, which she uses. There's been almost nothing written about this in history. It's all been oral, and oral traditions all over the world. As far as I know, there's only been, 3 books written. Well, if you count my book, I guess 4 books, but without that, there's only been 3 books written ever about this sacred space. The oldest, well, it's hard to say what's the oldest one. Probably the oldest one is with the Torah. Many Jews don't know that there's a separate book to the Torah, and it's a little tiny book, and it's named the Secret Cavern or Cave of the Heart, I think at least half or more of the Jews don't know it exists because it's bound separately in this little tiny thing. And I would love to get one of those and understand it. I've talked to 2 or 3 rabbis that, yeah, that's there, it's real. Can I have a copy? Sure, of course, but I never get it. As people say, oh yeah, I got one at home. Can I have it? Sure, I'll give you one, but I never get it. And it's just because it's too sacred, and I understand. It's okay. But there's another one in India called the Upanishads. And that book I remember a long time ago in the 60s, or early 60s, when I became interested in spirituality, I started reading spiritual books, and I ended up reading every single book in this store that I was in. And I began to realize they're all saying the same thing. It's the same thing with different slants, but it's all the same thing over and over and over and over. And but when I came to the Upanishads, I read that, and I remember reading it and going, I got all through it, and I put it down and just kind of looked at it and go, what is that? It didn't fit into anything else. There was nothing else that it approached to that it was similar to, and I really didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know till many, many, many years later, where I had direct experience myself. And then when I applied that over, when I reread that book later, many years later, then it made perfect sense. It's just 108 people, just like you and me, no different, human beings, who found their way into their heart and then wrote down their experience. And so it's 108 people saying, this is what happened to me, this is what happened to me, this is what happened to me. And there's a lot of similarities running through it. So after you've been into the heart and you really become more familiar to it, read that book and it'll make total sense. Because it'll be the same experiences that you're having, only they might have ones you haven't had yet, or this one might have ones you have had, but you'll see. It's kind of an important book on the subject. There was a modern day book. It was written about 20 years ago out of New Zealand, and it's from the Waitaha tribe. They are one of the oldest tribes in the world. They go back about roughly 160,000 years. And they remember going back 65,000 years. I am Waitaha now. I've been through all the ceremonies, and it takes a long time. It takes 3 days just to go through the ceremonies. I'm now legally a Waitaha, so I can talk about these things. And they can remember their lineage going back 65,000 years, which was at the end point of when Lemuria sank. They came from Lemuria. And they, in their ceremonies, the elders can repeat their entire names of all their lineage. It takes days. And especially since the names are from here to the wall. I mean, we have little names, they have long names. And so they can remember their mother and their father and their grandfather and their grandmother and their great-grandfather and their great-grandmother, and it keeps going back 65,000 years. And if you're brought into some of their sacred temples, you can see on the walls all their memories, if you can read it. And they talk about how they used to live in the water, and they didn't have a spine. It was all kind of more like cartilage. They were more like a fish. And right on the walls, you can see they have webbed hands and webbed feet. They weren't very tall. They were probably maybe only this high. And they were incredibly sexual beings. I mean, their entire focus on life was on sex, just about. That was everything to them. And they had very interesting relationships in what they believed sexual energy was to other tribes that are in farther north, like in Finland and in the Netherlands and up in there. There are ancient ideas from them that aren't talked about in modern day times, but their relationship was almost identical. And they feel in a relationship, they feel this kinship with them. A lot of the New Zealanders feel that they are related somehow. I don't know what all that is about exactly. But they wrote a book called The Song of the Waitaha. And you can't buy it unless you're in New Zealand. Maybe somewhere, I don't know where. It's a big white book, heavy. And they put in their understandings of the heart and the dreaming, and how the dreaming becomes real, and they could change their world through their dreams. And to us, dreams are just dreams, but what most of us don't know is that we have two dreaming bodies. We have one dreaming body associated with our right brain, and we have another dreaming body associated with our heart. The dreaming body from our right brain is polarized. In other words, you can have a good dream or you can have a really bad dream. You can have nightmares. But then there's dreams that are totally separate and individual, completely different dreaming body associated with the heart that never has a negative. It's not polarized, so it has no... You can't have a bad dream from the heart. It only makes good dreams. Or it could make a neutral dream, but nothing that would be considered negative. If you think you're in your heart and you're having a negative image, you're not in your heart. You're just in your brain imagining you're in your heart. Because it just won't happen. And so there's very little that has been talked about throughout the world on this subject. It's always been oral. And they would tell people, but they would never write it down. It was just considered too sacred to even discuss, to write down. Because as soon as you write it down, some people will misunderstand it, and there's always problems in those kind of ways. That's what I feel anyway. And so we talked about the ascension being just a movement from the brain back to the heart again, and really, after all the study I've had on this in my whole life, it's really all it is. It's that simple. You can make it complex. You could say, okay, ascension is spaceships coming down and getting on, and they take you into other dimensions and all these kinds of ideas with like the Ashtar command and on and on and on. But really, 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 it is just returning back to the heart. When we fell, we came up here, and we're just going back there. And once you're there, that's it. It's it. It's really simple, without any, even if you're still completely in your human body and you're on your job and you're doing everything else like that, ascension has reached its most important point as soon as you return back to the heart. Because the heart will lead you through everything else, but it will bring you back. If there is a spaceship involved, it will come to you, whatever it is, but you don't have to do anything after that. Once you've found that, all the rest of it is automatic. It's easy. Now, I've received this information primarily from indigenous people, because they're the only ones that remember what this is. The indigenous world, the industrial world, regardless of the color of your skin or where you're from, or what your religion is, if you're involved in the if you're living with televisions and cars and this industrial world, and you've accepted it into your life, most of us have completely forgotten the heart. We don't even know we have one. And where I find the truth is out in the jungles and in these high deserts and places where there's indigenous people that are still living this truth. It's so amazing. Just like right now, we were hugging each other and everything, and you were beginning to feel what it's like to be in a tribe. Because in a tribe, there's no, a lot of the tribes have been corrupted. Like the relationship between the Navajo and the Hopi here in Arizona, there's been lots of trauma that have happened to them. But when you get out in places where they've completely isolated from the world, it's a different thing altogether. Once they allow you into the tribe, you're just like with a bunch of children. They're so easy. Their hearts just leap over to you, and it's beautiful. We don't get those kind of experiences very much. You had a little bit of it just a few minutes ago. But just imagine in your entire world living like that, where everybody loves everybody and there's hardly any problems at all. Occasionally, but not much. And so that's where I found it. In fact, it was the Kogi and the Arawakos in Colombia that really did it for me. I was beginning to understand it a little bit before that, but it wasn't until I met them that I really began to understand the nature of what we were talking about. I had no idea. Studying the Merkaba and sacred geometry and even the beams of light and all this other stuff, that's one thing. But the heart is another world. It's another totally secret, other way of existing. And it's not just love. It's much, 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 much more than that. And so communicating that to the industrial world, it's not easy because you can't make a straightforward translation. There's no words you can use. I'm going to try to use a few, but it all comes down to experience. It's experiential. It's touch. It's feel. It's feeling it. You can't talk about it. You can talk about it forever, but it doesn't do anything until you actually get into the actual experience of what the heart is. Yeah.
When you say that once you get in your heart, then it's very easy, can you talk more about that? That once we go there, ascension can seem complicated, but once we go there, it's...
Well, I am slowly going to do that, but I would really like you to get the experience more than anything, and then I probably won't have to say much for most of you. But ascension comes down to, and this is what the Mayans and the Hopi and a lot of, and the Kogi, the Wakos, all of them are saying, even the Zulu in Africa and the Waitaha and the Maori and the Kunu, I think almost all tribes will agree with this, is that it's so simple, it's too simple for me to tell you right now. And so I have to wait till we have a little bit more experience, and then at the right moment I will say this really simple thing to do, and if you do that, you've just won the game of life. You're totally safe. You absolutely will go all the way, but I can't say it now because it's too. You won't believe it. It's too easy, and so we have to go a little bit further. I want to talk about darkness. The pineal gland uses two eyes to see with, and your eyes can't see unless there's light. You have to have light or you can't see. If it's totally darkness, you're blind and you can't see. With your heart, it is the exact opposite. The heart requires darkness to see. That's kind of a strange thing when you really think about it. Light interferes with being able to see with the heart. You can learn how to be in your heart and see when they're in light, but you have to learn how. It takes a little bit. The super psychic kids all over the world, they basically do everything they can to get rid of the light. Some of them put like tissue crammed inside of here and things wrapped around and everything else like that. And people think that they're cheating and looking underneath and everything, when in fact they're trying to get it as dark as possible. Because once they go into total darkness, then this shuts down, and then it's very, very easy to move into the heart because it sees with darkness. So when you enter into the heart, it's always black, just totally black. And you then have to ask for the light. You have to use intention to get the light. And as soon as you do, the darkness becomes a light field and you can see in it. However, the heart isn't quite as straightforward as this. With the eyes, you have all kinds of light, that you can see with, but in the heart, it will. When you ask for light, which you must do, but when you ask for light, it's hard to say what kind of light you're going to get back. It might be daylight. It might be light like this kind of light. It could be like moonlight. It could be psychedelic light, and a lot of people get that too, where just the colors are incredible. And vibrant and everything. And some people have, some of it comes on, and the light may come on. Anything you can imagine. It might come on like a dimmer switch. You ask for it and nothing happens, and it comes on very, very, very slow. So slow that you don't even realize it's happened. I remember I had several people actually. This one guy though, I remember he was going, light never came on, and so I started talking to him. He says, it's just stayed absolutely black the entire time. In fact, I kind of got bored with it, and there was a chair sitting there, so I went over and I sat down in the chair. And then I said, wait a minute, how did you see the chair? And he went, I don't know. And that happens all the time. Sometimes it'll just come on so slow that it might take 15 minutes to come on, and you don't even notice it. And you're actually seeing, but you still think you're in the darkness when you're not. And so I've seen that many times. And then sometimes it'll come on, and then it'll go off, and then it'll come back on later, and it'll come back on, and it'll do all kinds of things. You just have to ask for the light and then just accept whatever happens and just go with it, because I don't know. It's between you and God. And God will give you the source of life literally, well, it's everywhere, but the source of life is very vibrant and can communicate with you totally in the sacred space of the heart. It's not even easy to do it in the outer space of the heart. We'll talk about, there's two different spaces of it, but the inner space of the heart, God is always there, always. And you can connect directly with the source. But we'll get into that. I'm just sort of opening the door a little on all of this. But this darkness is an important part of all of it. Also, the light, when you receive it through the eyes, it goes into a brain that is polarized. And so your light is coming from somewhere to somewhere. And because of that, you can make a shadow. But in the heart, it's a different kind of light. It's a non-polarized light. It's not coming from anywhere, going anywhere. Everything just is light. And not the kind of light that we normally think of. And so what's interesting is you cannot throw a shadow inside of there because there's no polarization. And it's one of the ways, it's not an absolute foolproof way because the mind is pretty tricky, the ego. But sometimes I do that and they're just, am I really? Yep. No shadows. And because it can get, the inner space of the heart can look a lot like this, but you'll see the difference. And basically everything just is light and it just glows. And so this is why, the primary reason why we've given you the blindfolds is so that they're kind of an essential tool, because if you're sitting here like this, and even if there's just a little tiny, even like an exit sign in there, it affects the being able to shut down the brain and making it easier to get into the heart. But once you've done it, once you know how to do it, and you go back and forth a few times, then you can get to the place where you're doing what I'm doing right now, is where I'm totally in the brain, but not in the way most people are in their brain. I'm in my heart. I'm actually sitting cross-legged right now in some sand, in a little place, and that's where my essence is. But I've learned how to be there and also look through here also. It took me a while to do that one. But we'll slowly get there. Now, I know I've written... How many people have not read the book Living in the Heart? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A few of you. Well... Most of you have read all this stuff, and you can go into it, but basically I was led through this. And I'll just give you a real quick sense of the history of this. Basically, I was meditating, doing the Merkaba meditation, because I thought that's all there was in the beginning. I didn't know there was more to this. I didn't have any idea of all this stuff we're starting to talk about then. But I would do the meditation, which usually takes about 4.5 minutes for most people, or 5 minutes. And then I would go for usually a half an hour, 45 minutes longer. I would just sit in the energy and feel it. And one day, I was just sitting there meditating in the darkness and just feeling the flow of energy. And then, bam, like a light switch, I was inside of a cave. And we wrote about it in the book. But it was the weirdest feeling because I was in my body, and I couldn't figure out what happened. I had no idea what had happened. I just thought I was having an hallucination, except that when I would go up to the walls, I could touch the walls, and they were just felt exactly like this, and I was really, really confused. And I remember walking around and looking at things and going, what is going on? What is happening to me? And then as quickly as I came, I'm sitting back in my body, meditating again. I remember getting out of that thinking, that was a very weird experience. And I kind of felt like maybe I just some wires got shorted out in my brain or something. I don't know what happened. And if it had never happened again, I'm sure I would have completely forgotten about it by now. But then a few days later, it happened again. And then it started happening every single time I went into my meditation. I would end up in this cave. And the angels weren't saying anything. They were just sitting there watching to see how I'd respond to this, I think. Let's see if he has a complete breakdown or what happens. So I figured, well, I'm going to study why I'm here all the time. I've got to figure out what this is. And there was, I call them photographs, but they weren't really photographs. It's hard to explain what they are. They were etched into the wall, but they really looked real. But there were 20 of these photographs of people along one side of the wall. And I'd never seen them in my life. I don't know who they were. And then there was this little round circle of sand back there with a lip. The floor everything was like one piece. It looked, you could see where somebody had chipped it out. But it was, the whole cave was just like one piece. And this lip came up and it was a circle and there was this white, soft silicon sand in there. Didn't know what that was. There was another thing over here, which was a big kind of an opening of about 20 feet or so. It was real high. And it had a sheet of light running down it, and I couldn't see into the light, and I couldn't put my hand through it or anything. It wouldn't allow me to. So I didn't know what that was. And then at the far end, there was a staircase that spiraled down to another level. And later I found out the light up in here was kind of a whitish light, but when I went down in there, it turned into a green light. And then there was doors, a hallway with lots of doors and doors. And then I didn't know what those things were. I mean, I was so confused. I had no idea what was going on. And slowly, this went over many years. And it wasn't until I hit the Kogi that I understood what had been going on, really understood what had been going on all these years. And they're experts, they really are. And they live in caves almost all the time too. I mean, that's their whole thing, is inside the earth is where they do almost all of their work. And so that's how it began for me. And then when the Kogi did this thing with me, I was really, they sent through the Mayans, they sent a runner to me with a little gift. They wanted me to, they just wanted to say thank you. And then so the runner said that this is from the Kogi and their Wakos, and they're saying thank you. And I was going, well, first of all, I'd never heard of them before. And so I'm saying, well, why? This is a tribe I don't even know about, so why are they saying thank you? Well, the Mamos, there's a tribe within a tribe. The bigger tribe is about 14,000 people. The Mamos are about 200 people. And the outer tribe looks at the inner tribe as they see them almost on the same par as we would see God in a way. The Mamos, what they are, is direct manifestations directly from Mother Earth, the Spirit of the Earth. They are directly connected. They call her a Luna, and they are one with her. And so the Mamos, they did things with me that are like considered normally impossible. They literally just would make a sound, and I would disappear from one area of where I was with them and reappear somewhere else in 1 second. And if you've never had this happen to you, it's pretty unusual. The feeling is just like all of a sudden you're here and then you're on the other side of Sedona somewhere or something else. It changes you. It has a big effect on you. It did on me. It would have on anyone, I think.
Were you in meditation?
No, I was not in meditation at all. I was just standing there. They did this quite a few times. They understand that we're walking around in a dream and that it's just pure consciousness. And so because they understand this, they know how to do things They understand the nature of the reality, which we do not understand at all. And because of that, they can do anything. They can change shape, they can change form, they can do anything. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, by far, the indigenous people have had major impacts on me in understanding this and being able to bring it to you in a coherent way. But there's also been others, and the psychic children that originated out of China, then went to Mexico, and then South America, and then Bulgaria and Russia, and they started showing up all over the world. These children have also blown my mind, and that's all they do, is they just go into total darkness, go into their heart, and in your heart is the Akashic records of all life everywhere. We mentioned that before, but they can read it and see it. And so they can take any one of you, never seen you before in your life, and tell you anything about you. They can tell you anything at all, things you don't even remember. They can tell you exactly dumb things like your bank account number and precisely how much money you have in your account to the penny. They never make an error, ever. I've never seen them even make one mistake, ever. And it's perfect. And we have that same ability. We can do that too. You can do that too. It's going to be part of the unfoldment when you remember what the heart is and your connection to it, that in there is all knowledge, all wisdom, everything, past, present, and future. And these children are able to go in there and enter into that space and be able to do this. When you see them do it, it's hard to believe they can do this when you're watching them do it. But it's true. It is definitely true. And there's millions of these children, though most of them are hidden and very quiet. There's really a lot of them. They're different than the indigo or the crystal kids or these things. They're totally different. The indigo kids, primarily their connection to each other is more psychic, and their connection is through computers a lot. This is their everything that's unfolding through there is primarily coming from the indigo kids. And but the psychic kids have the same thing, only it's internal instead of external. They close their eyes and they see a screen, and on that screen has little screens that are going around it that are moving at really high speed. You got to really get into it to slow yourself down to be able to see those things. But from there, it's the same way. They could know anything from that. And most of these indigo kids are from 1972 forward, but there were a few that came in earlier. I was one, but there's a lot of other ones. Marianne Shenfield was another one. I met her in 1990, and she's totally blind. I mentioned her before. She has no eyes, but she can drive cars and read books and watch television, and you'd never know, but she has no eyes. But her body she is one who lives, she's floating around the solar system all the time. She was the one I said about that when NASA found her and made her go along one of the satellites and read the serial number on this thing. And she is, I know her, I know what she's doing pretty much. She's interfaced, and I don't know how she does this, but she's interfaced right in the middle between the fourth dimension and third dimension. If she turns this way, behind her is the fourth dimension, in front of her is the third dimension. And she's really incredible what she can and cannot do. Okay.
The indigo kids and the super psychic kids, they are from humanity or from extraterrestrial origin?
There may be exceptions that come from humanity, that have died and come back as an indigo kid, but almost all of them are from space. And not just space, but other dimensions. They're from much higher consciousness.
Thank you.
And again, this is why there's so many people here. This has never happened before. We've never had 7 billion people on Earth. They're coming from everywhere. They want to be here. But there were many. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'll tell this story about Oscar Mendoza because it was not in the book. But I did mention Inga Bardor. She was one of the super psychic kids, which her and my wife are really close. They're always talking all the time. She just talked a couple of weeks ago. Inga is one of the Mexican super psychic kids that we did that video on through the eyes of a child, where before 600 people in Denver, she was blindfolded and was able to read with her hands and her feet and show all these different kinds of things. I wanted her to float like a big heavy rock around the room, which she can do easily. And her mentor was there and her mother was there, and they just freaked out. You can't do that. You will not do that. Because their worry was that when Inga went back to Mexico, anybody doing psychic things like that are considered evil in Mexico. I mean, and they'll kill you. And so she was seen with her hands and feet. They weren't too worried about that, but they were really concerned about doing something obvious, like floating a rock around the room. So it never happened. It's too bad. But we were one time mentioned in the book about these two guys, and one of them, when she was she was sitting and she was blindfolded, and she was looking at photographs and telling what was in the photographs. Does you guys remember that? Okay. Well, there was one guy that came in and said, I don't believe you. You're looking underneath here in the beginning. And so she had to do this whole thing to convince him. And even after she was reading everything, he still didn't believe it. And he was the one that brought up his driver's license and handed it to her upside down and backwards. And she immediately turned it over, did this whole thing like that, and told him and read the whole thing on the driver's license. That's your driver's license. And then he said to her, I still don't believe you. Tell me something that only I know. And remember, that was the one, he was there with her girlfriend. And he said, and she's really mischievous. So she goes, okay, well, what you know and your girlfriend doesn't know is that you have another girlfriend. And her name is da-da-da, and stuff like that. And he was just like blown away by this. And so after that, where there was a break, and he was standing over by a big plate glass window looking up at the sky, and he was kind of, I guess, embarrassed and not feeling good. And she knows exactly what he's feeling and everything else like that. And she saw that his sadness. And so she went over to him and said, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you like that. And he says, oh, it's okay. And he said to her, or she said to him, she says, I want to give you a gift. And he said, okay, well, what is it? And she says, you see that big cloud up in the sky? And there's a big billowing white cloud like that. She says, I want to show you so you know for sure, absolutely for sure, that this is real. And he says, what are you going to do? She goes, this is a laser gun. And I'm going to cut the cloud in half. And she goes, and the cloud was cut right in half with a perfect line right down. And she just cut it the other way. 4 sections cut perfectly in half with a straight line right down the middle like that. And he saw that happen. That's usually an illegal thing to do, but she did it. And he was instantaneously transformed. He went from a skeptic to an absolute believer. And he ended up teaching the Flower of Life in South America, and he became one of the greatest facilitators down there because he knew for sure what he was talking about was really real. And so I figured I'd just tell you that little story. And so there has been many people that have led up to this, and And I think we've all had these things. We all have our little people that have led us up to this moment, that have got us to the place where we understand what's going on. It's usually other people or events that have taken place. Oscar Mendoza, yeah, that's his name. He's Mexican too, I think, but he might not be. He might be from Colombia or Venezuela. I'm not sure, actually. There's another thing associated with that's different between the heart and the body, and I mentioned this once before, but I do want to say it clearly again, and that is the emotional body. You have a different dream state. The brain has one kind of dream state, heart has another one. You have an emotional body. The brain has one emotional body, and everything is always polarized with the brain, and so you have emotions that are love, hate, relationships of everything, and then you have a completely different emotional body in the heart. And I mentioned that when you talk about unconditional love, that's the only place where there's unconditional love. There's never, ever unconditional love in the brain. If all you got to do is just find the thing that really offends the brain or the ego, and that person will stop their love for someone. It really is conditional from the brain. About the only time that human beings have ever felt unconditional love from the heart, at least an instant that I can think of, and many women have felt this, is that right immediately after birth, the baby comes out, the cord is still connected, and the baby's sucking on the breast, and the mommy looks down at the baby, and at that moment, she's loving the baby from her heart. She would die for that baby right now. I mean, maybe not all women, but most women. And there's a short time when they switch from the brain to the heart, and at that moment, it's a different kind of love they're feeling than what they normally feel. It's that powerful, unconditional love from the heart. And those are about the only, it's not too many ways, or it's usually a life and death situation. It's a birth thing, or someone's almost dying, and at that moment you realize how much you love that person. And again, you switch over to the heart love, which is different from the brain love. And there are also two creation patterns. There is a way of creating through the brain, which is polarized, where you create something and you get what you want, but you get what you don't want. It's polarized. And there's also a way of creating from the heart, completely unpolarized. You get exactly what you want, and you do no harm. Every single thing that's in the brain, any characteristic that the brain has, the heart will have that same thing. The only difference is one will be polarized and one will not be polarized. There's also a vibration that is in the heart. So when you enter the heart, the first thing you have to do is you have to ask for light. By the way, after you've done this and you get the whole procedure, then when you read Genesis in the first paragraph, it will become pretty clear, I think, that every time you go into the heart, you're beginning Genesis again. You're moving straight through the same set of procedures that you do through Genesis, which in Genesis, the very first thing is let there be light. You begin through the whole thing, and you really are entering into the creation again every time you do it. Eventually, though, you're going to stay there. So besides when you enter in, you first ask for light. If you get it, okay. If you don't get it, you still keep going. And the very next thing I'm going to ask you to do is to feel the vibration that's in there. Because it feels like everything is just vibrating. Of course, you're in a heart beating, so it would make sense, I guess. But it's more than that. There is in the Upanishads, they say that is Om. That is the true Om, is the vibration that's in the heart. And so you have this sound that's kind of just going on and on and on and on all the time. It's in there. And one of the first things I'll ask you to do is to feel that vibration or hear the vibration or sense it in whatever way you can. And then once you do feel it or sense it, I'm going to ask you for just a moment for maybe 45 seconds or so or something like that, to actually use your voice and try to duplicate what you're sensing or you're hearing or you're feeling. There's a reason for that. That vibration is a key. It is the key for you to return it instantly. All you have to do is feel the vibration, and you're right back there again. And so in the beginning, we're going to use different methods of getting into there. But once you're in there and you know where it is and you know what it is, if you can remember the vibration or feel the vibration, you can use that to pull yourself directly back into it. You look at a Kogi and they'll be sitting there talking with words, and then they'll just close their eyes and they're instantly back there, and they'll be communicating telepathically with everyone. And so they go back and forth. If there was someone that they know can't do telepathy, they'll talk to you. If they think you can, they'll just talk to you from within their heart. And I was just recently when I was there. I also discovered that depending on what level you are on the mountains, depends on your evolutionary level. So when you first enter in at about 12,000 feet, these people are still using pendulums. They're still learning. Even though they might be old, they're still kind of learning. And you go up just 1,000 feet more, and it's a totally another nobody. They're all telepathic from there on in. And I remember I lived with them for about 2 weeks. And they gave me a grass hut, and you sleep in a hammock and all this kind of stuff. And they even let me come into the New Way, which is a big building about this big, with 4 fires, one for each of the 4 tribes. And in there, it's extremely intimate, the way they all lie together and everything, and people talk, and they're sharing their thoughts and their feelings about everything that's going on. And after about a week or so, they brought me up higher into the mountains. Anyway, there's a bridge there that they seal off. It goes across this big river, and I actually was on that bridge. But they took me up higher into the mountains, into this mountain that was surrounded by mountains. So I was like a mountain, and then big mountains all the way around it. And I had to meet one of the primary mamos there. And he was just sitting on the edge of a cliff and looking out over the cliff, and he never turned around, because it doesn't matter to them whether they're facing you or not, because they can communicate and see as well. And so I was there with this mamos that was 120 years old. I could barely keep up with him. I mean, he was basically at a slow run at 12,000 feet to 13,500 feet, and he's 120 years old. And he looks like he's 60, and which is like a kid to them. And so he was guarding me. He was my guardian, and he brought me up there, and he made me sit on a rock. When they have meetings, they call them convenings. They convene, and they only convene when they're on rocks, because rocks are alive to them. They're living people. And that's where they go. So we're on these big rock formation on the top of this little mountain. And the rock came like that, and it came up higher. And he made me sit with my back up against this rock. He says, just find a place that's comfortable. So I did. I found it. And then he sat right next to me. And he says, the mama says, the other one's going to call all the other mamas. Well, nobody did anything. Actually, on the way up there, we had a Spanish guy that was coming with us. And he was on a cell phone. I couldn't imagine there would even be towers there or somewhere, but he could talk on the cell phone. And the other man here he started laughing, and he picks up a rock, and he goes, I got a cell phone. And But anyway, I'm sitting back a little bit because they said the lights were blinding. They couldn't see me, so I'm getting back here. Where they're not. The people on the side don't see, looking at me in the lights. And he said, he says, well, the mom is going to call people. So he's still looking out over the cliff and never had turned around. And so he doesn't move, doesn't do anything, and within just a few minutes, from every single peak and from every single place, all these people started coming down the side of the mountains. And they're like running down these mountains, just down these things that you would probably think you're going to slide down, you know. And they're just like goats. And then within a very short time, 20 minutes or so, there was about 50 mamas standing around us. And they all started talking. One started talking. And then they talked for a little while, and the other one, but they're talking in Kogi. And, I can understand it. So my protector here, he knows what I'm thinking and everything. And so he tells me, he says, close your eyes. So I close my eyes. And like, poof, he's in my vision. He's in there, perfectly in there. And he goes, okay, can you see me? Yeah, I can see you. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. He says, okay. And he says, I'm going to tell you what they're saying. So he starts translating to me what the Kogi are saying. So I'm listening to what they're saying by a translator, by a guy sitting next to me. And then about 10 minutes into it, he's in there talking. He goes, and he says something. He starts laughing. And pretty soon he's sitting here, but in the inner vision, he's on the ground, rolling on the ground, laughing. And I go, why are you laughing? And he finally gains composure inside this thing, and he goes, well, I've never spoke English before. It is such a weird language. He says, it feels funny. And so, I mean, they can speak any language at all. In fact, it's pretty astounding how fast they can learn a language. Science just figured out that we have a place inside of us that can learn any language in the world in 10 days. And I'm following that one right now. I want to know where that goes. I want to learn a language in 10 days. And about 10 of them I'd like to have. So, anyway, back to this thing with the vibration. It's important that you can feel it, because if you can feel it, you can make you can make this transition back and forth between the world of the heart and the world of the brain really, really fast. And the Upanishad says that this vibration is older than the universe itself. Whatever that means. And it's kind of like, it's very, very similar. The Great Pyramid in Egypt was built to represent human consciousness. And within there, especially it comes from somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure where, but in the Great Pyramid, there's this almost identical, if not identical, vibration that's in the Great Pyramid. How many people have been to the Great Pyramid? That was about 10 people. How many people felt that vibration I'm talking about when you're in there? So it's about half of them. Some people don't feel it. I don't know how, because it's like when you're in there, it feels like everything's just. It feels like the air is vibrating. Everything is vibrating. And that was the first thing I felt when I went in there. Was, what is this? Everything's moving. And, but anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because it's important. Now, there is another thing that's equally as important, and that is, in order to get into the heart, you must hold that vibration before you get into the heart. If you don't have that vibration within you, you can't get in. It will not let you in. And the way you get the vibration before you get there is by what we call the unity breath. It's a meditation. And so we will lead you through this before we go. But in essence, what it is you must connect with the heart of the world with love. You must love Mother Earth. You love her, and she sends her love back to you, and you feel it. And when you do, you connect with her. And then without breaking that, you connect to the heart of the sun. It's really, by doing that, you're connecting to the heart, to all the rest, to the heart of the universe. But by connecting to the heart of different tribes do it in different ways. The Hopi do it by connecting to the central sun. They understand that, and they connect directly to the central sun. And I learned this through the Hindus, through Sri Yukteswar, which is Yogananda's guru, and he tells you to connect to the grids that are around the earth, because those are connected to all life everywhere also. It's a more sophisticated way, in a way. And but almost all the tribes I've ever been with, they connect to the sun. And our star is connected to all other stars, and it goes on, and everything's interconnected. But it's all about, so you connect to the sun, the heart of the sun. You have to love it. Love. It's your Divine Mother and your Divine Father. And so you have to connect to the Divine Mother, and you're the Divine Child. And then you connect to your Father, Divine Father, through that heart by sending love and feeling His love come back. And when it does, it makes the Holy Trinity. You have the Divine Mother, Divine Father, and you, the Divine Child. And there's a love flow that goes between the child to the mother and father, but the child must also be aware of the love between the mother and the father, that connection that's going that way too. And so we'll lead you through it, but when you do that, it puts a vibration in your spirit. And that vibration is the key that opens the door that allows you to enter into the heart. Now, emotional trauma could still stop you, because if the pain level because of emotional trauma stops you, but that's something I can't help. But with or without, even if you're totally clean and you have no emotional trauma, no problems, if you don't have this vibration, you can't get in. And so what happens very often, and I've seen this many, 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 many times, is people come in here, I lead them through it, they get into their heart. They got it. They go back home, and they can't ever do it again. And because they don't think that this connecting with the heart of the earth and the heart of the sun is important, and they don't do that, and they keep trying to get in, but you can't. You have to have this vibration. Whether or not that vibration is identical to the one that's inside there, I'm not certain. But if it isn't, it's an overtone, or it's connected, or it's in harmony with it, or it is identical. I'm not really sure. It feels the same to me, but I'm not positive. So when we get to that place, we will, when we do the first one, I will lead you carefully through those steps. And then if you haven't ever done it before, it's pretty easy once you understand it. It's really easy to do. But don't underestimate it as just something that's kind of a nice thing to do. It's more than that. There are, just as there are two emotional bodies and two dream states and two ways of creating and all that other thing, the heart, the sacred space of the heart is also divided into two areas. And the heart math discovered that generated from the heart is the largest energy field that the body creates. The brain is small compared to the heart. This is 8 to 10 feet in diameter. And centered off-center from the axis of your spine and right through the center of the heart is a toroidal field that comes up and around and it comes back in, just like the magnetic field of the earth. And there is one big one and a smaller one inside. Those proportions are very important, what they've discovered, and they're identical to what you see up here. If you look at the... for those of you who have studied the first two books, you know that you're looking at the 5 platonic solids in here. So if you see this cube, look at the hexagon that runs around and the 3 lines that run through the middle. If you look at only those lines, you see a cube on an edge view. So you're looking at it like this is the cube, but you're looking at it like that. And so these lines and these lines come together and they form 3 lines. So does everybody see what I'm talking about? Okay, but then in here farther is another one, another cube. There's a cube within a cube. And that's true with all of them. Here's the star tetrahedron in here. And then if you go inside smaller, there's a smaller star tetrahedron inside of there. And it goes through all the 5 platonic solids. Each one has a big one and a little one. And it's kind of related to the male and female thing, where males are bigger and females are smaller. And but there is always this relationship. And so it's not only in sacred geometry, but it's also in the actual way that the heart configures the original place of creation. So when you enter into your heart space, you always enter into the external space first. So when you first walk in or move into that space, you're not in the sacred space. It is all sacred, but they call this little tiny place the Upanishads keep referring to it as just the tiny space of the heart, but it's more sacred. And so you first enter into the external space, which has, relative to it, there is a size relationship. But once you're in that external space can appear to you as infinite. It can actually appear to you as the universe itself, and very, very, very often will. But you have to learn how to find the tiny space. And when I say tiny, it's usually not much bigger around than this. It's usually a very small little place somewhere. However, its appearance could be anything. It could be a cave, it could be a little house, it could be a room, it could be a spaceship, it could be anything at all. It could be anything, it could be a temple. But it is always really small relative to the big one outside. This is also a means of getting into it. This was a problem I was confronted with the after the Kogi taught me all these things. Then they said, okay, there was a point where they didn't think that we could be taught this. And they really only wanted me to work with animals in the beginning. So I worked with only animals in the first part, with horses and all kinds of animals. After a while, it got pretty exciting, really, because I could just walk into a middle of there'd be a bunch of deer in a thing, and usually when you start to walk toward deer, they all run away. But when you're in your heart space, you're not seen as a threat. They feel the vibration. They just look at you and just keep right on eating. It's like a bird landing on their back or something. They don't even mind. And I would walk right up to them and stand there and pet them and everything else, and they would just keep right on eating. I wouldn't even disturb them. And so I could see, it was biofeedback, I could see that this was true. They also told me the more wild they are, the easier it is to do this. At this point, I like being out in where there's lots of wild animals, and I prefer it. It's hard to explain. I remember one time I was in Paraguay, and I was just into this whole thing with animals and stuff, and somebody says, "Well, could you show us?" And so I went out, but they don't have any animals anywhere. There's not even cows there. I couldn't find anything hardly, at least where I was in Paraguay. There was just nothing. And I was sitting there, and this big frog, this frog was like that big. Was my animal. And I just dropped into the heart, and this little sound came out of me, and that frog went bloom, bloom. And he went, bloom, 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 bloom. Right up to me and looked up at me. And I got down really low in it, and I was right down like this and looking into its eyes. And we started making sounds together and all this stuff. And these people were watching me. and then I was at a break, and I had to go back. And I says, don't go away, I'll be right back. And he says, okay. And I go in there, I was in there 2 or 3 hours. I come back, and it's still sitting there. Hadn't moved. And it's really, it changes your relationship to all of life. It just completely changes it. And I mean, remember in the Bible when it talks about the Tower of Babel, that it states clearly that before the Tower of Babel, there was one language in the world. And that one language we could talk to each other with, and we could speak with the animals with the same language. And I'm convinced that this is what it is. You can speak to any life form, and even ETs understand this life form, this language. It's a language that comes from the heart. It's what the Kogis says. It's a language that has no words. In other words, it's a sound that does not mean something. It's a sound that creates an image in you, and that's what they mean. And so the same sound can create many different images depending on what your heart is putting with it. And it's very, for those of you that know Palladian, it is Palladian. Palladian people use that language when they talk, and it's how they communicate with each other. Anyway, slowly getting there. I mean, you need to know all these little things. Otherwise, when we say, okay, let's do it, you go, let's do what, you know? Where are we going? The other thing is that this is a mental concept, an idea, but it's really true. You can't be in your heart if you with the way that we have fixed ourselves into the brain and seen through these two eyes. If you're going to be in your heart, you have to break that connection. You have to leave it. And later you can come back. And we'll talk about this when we get into the here. Once you get into the heart, you can reestablish the connection in a different way from your brain, where you could be in your heart and see from your brain. But initially, you can't. Initially, you have to sever the connection with the brain. You literally have to let go of it and move. There's a movement. There's a actual physical movement that you have to make in order to get to your heart. And that movement has to do with spirit itself. Most people think that they are their bodies. But you're not your body. Your body is more like a coat you've put on. And spirit can drop that body and take another body any time it wants to. It isn't something that is, you're not this. Spirit is you're separate from that. I think almost everybody here understands that, but a lot of people in the world don't understand that. They think they are their body. And you... spirit, just talking about spirit itself, there's great spirit. There's one spirit that moves through all life everywhere, of which we are intimately connected to. But great spirit has also done all kinds of things to create different kinds of experiences. And so our spirit is really, we can think of it as coming like a piece of the Great Spirit. It's much more than that, but we are actually Great Spirit experiencing humanness. But Spirit has an ability that isn't quite understood here on Earth, and that is that spirit can either be infinite or finite. Literally, you can be the entire universe and all levels of existence simultaneously now. And there are lots of people that have done that and are doing it at this moment. And then spirit can also be finite. It could be a piece of the. It could be a galaxy or a planet or a sun or an animal or a human being or an atom or anything else. When it is finite, when it's infinite, it has no center. There is no place. Excuse me. There's no place that you could say, this is the center, because it's everywhere. But the moment it chooses to become finite, whatever it is, if it's a planet, then the center is in the exact center. If it's a human being, it's interesting. Human beings are able to move their center around. And so we can go through this in a moment, maybe we will. Most people are centered in their pineal chakra. But there are other possibilities. You can also be centered in your heart. You could be centered in your liver. You could be... Carlos Castaneda is centered over his right shoulder, I believe it is, out here, about that far away. Not even in his body. A lot of people are centered out here in front of themselves, and they know this. So, just for example, how many people know that they're centered somewhere not in their body? Is anybody? One, and only one person? Where are you centered?
It varies.
It varies? You move it around?
It seems that it definitely zips in and out.
But where are you now?
Well, I'm here. I'm definitely cognizant. One thing that definitely strung a chord with me just now is you said that there could be one intelligence in multiple people, and sometimes I look at myself almost like a LimeWire or a Napster program where like multiple things might be able to utilize me. So.
Yeah. Well, there are whole planets where every single person on that planet is a cell in a larger consciousness. And they're just the same way that we have cells in our body, and they're all connected together to create us.
Right.
And all of us are connected on other levels of existence with other parts of ourselves. But I'm really only referring right now to just this body and where they're centered. In the last workshop, I had about 7 or 8 people, and they were centered in different places around their bodies. And then when you go inside the body and say where you're centered, okay, inside the body, is anybody centered in some other place other than the heart or the brain? Well, you guys are boring.
I'm not really sure, but when I first started to wake up, it's like I would leave my brain, and I would think, but I would be somewhere else. It's almost like I would come out here and be something of an observer of myself. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about? Because I really couldn't identify. I was actually going to ask you about it. Where am I going when something just shifts? I'm not looking through my eyes anymore. I'm out here.
Well, there's really a near infinite well, I guess it actually is mathematically infinite of where you could be. Usually, though, you're always inside of your Merkaba field, which the whole Merkaba field is just a giant sphere. You may see the stuff inside of it and everything, but it's just a huge sphere, about 55 or 60 feet in diameter. And usually when people are centered, they're inside that sphere somewhere. But
is it something that you can look at, and can you see where they are?
No, that's really, I don't know if you could perceive that. Maybe, I guess you could somehow. I don't know how to do it. I just know that after talking to lots and lots and lots of people, I know that they're not all centered. I know that most people are centered in their heads, and that's the sensation, is that you're looking out of your eyes, and this is kind of more going on here than anywhere else. And maybe when you're in sexual energy, it's different. That your attention changes and your centering changes a lot on that. It depends on your chakra system of where you're focused too. A lot of things. But anyway, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to what I'm really trying to say here. Anyway, I just stated that people can be, when you're finite, you have a center, and that center can be moved around. And we're in just a little bit, we're going to move your center around. You've maybe never moved your center around before, but any minute it's going to happen. We're going to do some exercises where you're going to move your center around. Once you start moving your center around, it's pretty interesting because your view of the reality can change. And when it does change, you can start doing things that you normally wouldn't allow yourself to do. I'm going to get about, probably, I usually do, I'll get about 30% of the people in here will be able to see with their hands pretty soon. You'll actually be able to look around the room with your hand as soon as you move your center off. The sound of water is also always connected to the heart. The heart always, there's certain things that are in the heart consistently, and one of them is water, and usually moving water, and or deep pools of water that when you dive into it, you come out into other worlds and things like this, and so you have the sound of water. And the other thing that is consistent, in fact, you really can't escape it, and that is the stars. There's always a place where you might wake up and you look in and you find that the external place of your heart is a temple, say a pyramid, and there's rooms in there. So you're going through all these different rooms, and you're indoors all the time when you're going through your heart space. But then you'll come over and you'll see a window, and you go over the window. There's the stars. The stars are always in the heart. The Upanishad, those 108 people, when you read each one of them, almost every one of them talks about how there's stars in the heart. In fact, this right after I wrote the Living in the Heart, and I sent it to my publisher, the very next day somebody sent me this, which is from the, I don't know if I can say this right, Chandogya Upanishad. And there's different Upanishads. There's 108 people, but a lot of them have eliminated that and brought it down to a smaller number. They just picked out the best ones. That's what they did. And so there's different translations of it. But this is what it says. It says, and this was in the book, but most people read it and don't really think about it, so I'm going to say it again. It says, if someone says to you, quote, in the fortified city of the imperishable, our body, there is a lotus, and in this lotus, a tiny space. What does it contain that one should desire to know it? You must reply, as vast as this space without is, the tiny space within your heart. Heaven and earth are found in it, fire and air, sun and moon, lightning and the constellations. Whatever belongs to you here, below, and all that doesn't. All this is gathered in that tiny space within your heart. This is 5,000 or 6,000 years old. And it'll be just as true today as it was then. The stars were originally created in your heart first. And this is one of the things we're going to be talking about later. And later were transferred to the external world. And they are not what you think, which I've been saying. That they're an image that was created, a dream state image created by the heart, which was then transferred to the brain in a very specific way, which we'll go into later. And so now we're living it and believing it's real, when really it's just an image. It's just consciousness itself. But you will find the same stars in your heart that you will find external to the earth. And I've learned recently, because I'm now connected with another intelligence inside the earth that I never knew was there, and they took me into the center of the earth. And the center of the earth is when you enter into the very center of the earth, it is external. It's the same. It's just infinite space, and the same stars, exactly the same ones that are there. It's changed my whole view of everything I thought was real, and now that I understand it, and I understand the geometries of how this is working and everything else like that, it makes so much sense. It really does. If you take a golden mean rectangle and you take the shorter edge and come over here and make a square out of it, what's left over is another golden mean rectangle, right? We all know this, or most of us do. And so then if you take the shorter edge and make another square out of it, it's left over is another golden mean rectangle. And that creates a spiral that goes in and in and in and in forever. It never ends. And so it's constantly getting littler and littler and littler and littler. But that same where you started from, which is where you are now, that's like this, we're in between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And so we start with this triangle, and you can see it goes forever. Well, it'll go out the other way. That triangle, if you take the longer edge and make a square out of it, you have another golden mean rectangle that's bigger. And it keeps going out, and then you can just keep doing that forever. And now that same spiral that went in forever will now spiral outwards forever, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This one getting infinitely big, the other one getting infinitely small. And that is the nature of our reality. You can go inside the moon, any star, any galaxy, the earth, or anywhere else, and when you go to the center, you will be in the same stars that you were at external. So if you have a sphere, the sphere is the surface. That is the size that is in between the macrocosm and the microcosm. Everything external here, that's all stars. But you go in the middle, it's all stars again. And science will eventually, right now, they're beginning to understand this. And it's changing our entire view of everything. When science really does understand that one thing, then spirituality and science will begin to merge and become one. Because that will happen. It always happens. Every planet eventually comes to their scientific understanding of everything and their spiritual understanding of everything merge at one point. And when that happens, they're no longer whatever level they were at. They become aware. That's when they first really, truly become aware of what is actually happening in the world. We're just living in a total illusion right now. You know, science is, and so are we spiritually on a lot of levels. We're not quite clear on what is happening. Okay. I got to take a time check. Ooh, we don't have any time. Okay, so I only have just another few minutes, and oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. Okay, I couldn't have done this any better if I had tried. This is where we start going into the sensory aspect of things. So I've pretty much told you everything you need to know on a mental level. Now we need to start doing it on a physical, tactile level, or an emotional level. So I think we can just stop right here and go to lunch, and we'll come back at 2:30. And when we do, we're going to... Have you ever danced in the dark? We're going to do dancing with your blindfolds on.